In this tutorial, we're going to take a closer look at the blanket order functionality in Epicor Advanced Requisition Management. Now, blanket orders can go by a few names. Sometimes they're known as blanket purchase agreements or even call-off orders. But depending on the industry, a blanket order can also have a few different meanings as well. So just to be clear, in the context of advanced requisition management, we're going to define a blanket order as a purchase order that gets placed with a supplier where the pricing has been negotiated and locked in advance, and where incremental deliveries will be occurring over a period of time. In Epicor, you can already create blanket orders for parts to be delivered over a period of time, and these are created per supplier. However, these sorts of contracts aren't always based on parts. In fact, one very common request we receive is how to use blanket order functionality for the ordering of services, so maintenance and repair services and that kind of thing. Now, the good news is that Advanced Requisition Management caters to this very scenario, and so this is what we'll be focusing on in our examples today. Now, blanket orders are particularly useful for service-related orders because, firstly, unless it's quoted in advance, we often don't know what the cost of a service is going to be up front. Not until after the service is performed, usually, where they'll give us an invoice and that's how much you'll need to pay. So you can't preemptively create a purchase order for this most of the time. We also don't know when some services are going to be required, so it's a timing thing. When are we going to need to get something repaired, or do we need to create these orders ad hoc? So for example, when a machine breaks down and needs to be repaired or replaced, again, we can't preempt that. So having a purchase order ready or having to go and create a purchase order retrospectively isn't always a very efficient way of doing things. But by approving a blanket order for an amount in advance, you can effectively then draw down from that amount incrementally as those services are required and performed until either the available blanket order balance is completely consumed or the time frame for which that blanket order was valid ultimately expires. So hopefully that makes some sense, but let's go into ARM now and see how that actually works in practice. So I'm going to log in now as Maurice. And because this is a core function of ARM, if you look on the left-hand side, you'll see that there should be a heading here for blanket pro forma orders. And when I click on that heading, all of my blanket pro forma orders will appear. Now, because these have to be based on a particular time frame, at any one point, some of these blanket orders may be active, the others may have expired, and you can see over on the right-hand side here under the blanket order status, it will let us know whether they're still valid or whether they've in fact been closed or exhausted. Now, the process of creating a blanket pro forma order is not difficult. In fact, it's done in the same way as we would create a requisition. So Maurice does have authority on his user profile to be able to create blanket orders, so it simply appears as another option here under requisition. So I click the blanket order header. I can name my blanket order, blanket. And then the one key difference, between, say, a requisition and a blanket order is that this blanket requisition has to have a start and an end date. So I'm going to go through and just say that this blanket requisition is for the beginning of January this year to the end of June. So it's for a 6-month period. And once I've specified my beginning and end dates, I then click the non-catalog button and I describe what it is that I'm creating this blanket requisition for. In this case, it's just going to be some services. Select the vendor that it's going to apply to or who the contractual arrangement is set up with. In this case, we're going to say it's IT experts. And for what amount? So organisations typically will have a look at what they spend in that 6-month period or what they have spent in that 6-month period over the last few years, get a sort of an average figure as to what that's going to be worth, and then they will enter that as their blanket order amount. And click Save and Close. So we have a blanket order requisition line here that is for $6,000 for some services work for the vendor IT experts, and this is going to be valid between the beginning of January to the end of June. Maurice would then submit this requisition and it would go through the approval process as normal. Now, I won't show that happening today because I think most of us will be familiar, and if not, there are separate tutorials that cover that aspect of the solution. But now let's go back to the blanket pro forma orders because I've actually done this in advance and I have an example ready to go. So if I open this one at the top here, what I had done originally is created 2 blanket order lines, one for services and one for repairs and replacements. Okay, so it has the same time frame, so it's still valid for the beginning of January to the end of June. It's still valid for $6,000, so we can see the total at the top. But I've started drawing down from this as these services have been performed, and you can see down the bottom here, I now have $3,861 and some change remaining to be able to continue to procure services as I require them. You can also see that there is a little plus button next to each line, and this indicates that there have been some totals drawn down from these lines. So if I click on them, you can see straight away that I've had a regular printer service going in January, February, March, and April. You can also see that the amounts of those particular services has varied depending on what needs to be done on that particular service. But that's okay, because I've allocated $4,000 of my blanket order to account for these expenditures that I can't know the value of in advance. And the process really is just to release however much is required at any point in time until that amount is either gone or the blanket order expires. I've also done this for the second line, so you can see that I've also, in addition to services, had a few items that have needed to be replaced over that time as well. And once again, these cost differing amounts depending on what breaks or what needs to be replaced. So the process of releasing an amount is actually very, very simple. All we need to do is we go across to the release field. So let's say we've had something fixed today, so something has broken and it's going to cost $200 to repair it. So the repair agent comes in, he says, yeah, that's going to cost $200. So I would type in 200. If I want to, I can put in a brief description, and then I go up to workflow and click release. Now a pop-up will appear. It will ask me for a description, and it will be, by default, it will always have today's date, but you can backdate it if you need to, and hit save and close. The blanket order screen now resets, and when I expand the repairs line now, I now have a new line number 7, where I can see that on this day I have drawn down an amount of $200 for some work that was done to replace a particular component on this machine. All right. So in Epicor, let's see what this looks like now. And one of the good advantages, again, of blanket orders is that all of these releases are coming off the one purchase order. So it's not like we're creating a separate purchase order with a separate purchase order number every single time. That can be a bit of a nightmare for the AP team. So all of these releases are actually being input or populating as receipt lines against purchase order number 1223 in Epicor. So I'm going to open my purchase order tracker now, and when I type in 1223, we can see that we have a whole bunch of lines appearing, and I'll just expand this a little bit so we can see what's going on. So at the top, we have 2 lines for servicing and repairs, okay, and we can see that that's the lines that we had on our original blanket order in ARM over here. And these remain open purchase orders with the remaining amount showing, okay? So we originally had a blanket order amount for $4,000 for the first line for services and $2,000 for repairs. And I can see in Epicor now that I have $3,312 and $349 respectively remaining on each of those lines. And those orders remain open. But as we draw down from those lines, we notice that we are getting all of these receipt lines populating, and these get closed as they're released. But what this is allowing us to do, it's making the matching process obviously incredibly simple, because when we receive an invoice from IT experts for $194.50, for example, we can clearly see that it's going to relate to that line there. So we're going to have a matching receipt line to go against every invoice that we receive. So quite powerful stuff and very, very simple. Now, obviously, like everything within ARM, the screen, the navigation, the functionality is all made to be extremely simple, quick, efficient, and with a lot of automation going on in the back end that you don't have to worry about. Now, blanket orders are just one of many core features of ARM that really help to extend the procurement functionality process in and around Epicor. If you'd like to know more about blanket orders, or indeed any of the functionality that Advanced Requisition Management can build upon with your current Epicor build, get in touch with your Epicor contact or let us know. Thank you.